For a time, Mike Jeffries had been the bassist manager. He siphoned money off the band. He still, in fact, owed them money. Who knows what was going through Chaz's mind to recruit a guy that had already kind of screwed him over. Perhaps he thought Jeffries would make it right by helping him kickstart Hendrix's career. Boy, did he put his faith in the wrong person. Jeffries would do to Hendrix exactly what he did to the Animals. He would steal Hendrix's money, even going as far as to set up an offshore account in the Bahamas that Hendrix didn't know about. At one point, Jimi Hendrix, at the peak of his career, would only be receiving 3% of his royalties, while Mike Jeffries siphoned off an astonishing 60%. By all accounts, Mike Jeffries was a very shady character. He seemed like the kind of person you didn't want to mess with. He wore dark sunglasses, he spoke in whispers. Not much is known about Jeffries in his early life, but we do know that he once worked for British intelligence, MI6.
Jeffrey was stealing money from him, sabotaging his career, planning people around him to spy on him and to subvert his own activities, his own life. And Hendrix, he had a growing awareness that this was happening to him and he knew who to blame.
Now let's talk about some other close people to Jimi Hendrix. Again, no one really knew Jimi. His family was his guitar. He'd had his heart broken too many times, but he did have girlfriends. It was all about free love at this time, and it was pretty natural for a famous musician to have more than one girlfriend. One of the main girlfriends he had was a German girl, daughter of a rich industrialist, ice skater, 24-year-old Monika Dannemann. According to Monika Dannemann's official statement, the day before Jimi died, they went to a club, Ronnie Scott's club, so Jimi could jam with a new band called Eric Burdon and War. Monika says Devin Wilson was already there. Now, let's stop for a moment. Let's talk about Devin Wilson, another girlfriend of Jimi's. Devin Wilson was somebody that was truly inseparable from Jimi. If Jimi did have a family, Devin was it. She was his girlfriend, his personal assistant. It was said that she could score him dope wherever he went in the world. And for Jimi, dope was, marijuana, LSD, occasionally cocaine, but he didn't mess around with heroin.
Heroin wasn't the drug at the time. Cocaine was just starting to rear its ugly head, and he admitted that he had tried cocaine several times, but not heroin.
Devin managed his recording sessions, basically his personal assistant. She also even organized for groupies to come to Jimi for orgies. Devin had a very hard life in her early life. At the age of 15, she's on the streets of New York prostituting herself, but by adulthood, she has become a muse, not only for Jimi Hendrix, but for Mick Jagger as well. Although she was one of Jimi's girlfriends, she was bisexual and she refused to give up her female lovers for Jimi. Instead, she would include her female lovers in the mix of things, which suited a young Jimi just fine. After all, this was a time of sexual liberation for both men and women. Free love was in the air. But the biggest reason that Jimi paid for Devin to follow him around the world had absolutely nothing to do with sex. It's been said that Devin could score drugs for Jimi anywhere in the world. Contrary to popular belief, Jimi wasn't into heroin. He wasn't into opiates. As said before, drugs for Jimi meant marijuana, LSD, and the occasional cocaine. He was even adamant that all of his friends who hung out with him did not do heroin. So we move into midnight, Thursday, September 17th, after Ronnie Scott's club. Monika Dannemann, remember, says that they went to this club so Jimi could jam, and Devin Wilson was there. So it's Jimi, Devin, Monika. They hang out together. They talk about everything from art and music to religion, voodoo symbols. They even sketch some drawings for Jimi's upcoming new album. Monika says Jimi warned her not to be accepting drugs from anyone, as people may want to harm her just for being with him. She is very specific in her official statement that Jimi emphasized this over and over again. Be cautious, do not accept drugs from anyone. Someone may want to harm you just for being my girlfriend. From there, Monika says Devin left and her and Jimi went peacefully to bed. And this is where Monika's story becomes very inconsistent with the account of others that would not be uncovered until almost 22 years later. Yet another girlfriend, Kathy Etchingham, says that it wasn't just Devin and Jimmy and Monica that night. She says Jimmy was with Alan Douglas. He was begging Alan Douglas to take over management for him, as he had discovered Mike Jeffries was siphoning millions of dollars to that offshore account in the Bahamas. Monica, in her official statement, never revealed that Alan Douglas was even there that night. Kathy also says that Jimmy revealed to Alan Douglas that night that some months prior he had been kidnapped by 3 thugs, held for ransom for 3 days, and then miraculously Mike Jeffries comes and rescues him. Mike Jeffries tells Hendrix, "You must never speak of this publicly. It's a mafia thing. You wouldn't understand. Just know that I know these people. I have things under control." Hendrix told Alan that he felt as though Jeffries had actually staged the whole thing to make himself indispensable to Jimmy, knowing that Jimmy was PO'd about him stealing money. According to Kathy Etchingham, Alan Douglas and Jimi Hendrix made several decisions that night that would affect Jimmy's future career, and these plans they were making did not include Mike Jeffries. They were not favorable to Mike Jeffries. The next morning, according to the other accounts revealed by Kathy Etchingham, Alan left for New York City on business for Jimmy, leaving his wife Stella there at Jimmy's hotel, the Cumberland Hotel in London, with Devin Wilson. Monica wasn't even there. A much, much different situation than the one Monica described. Now we move to later in the day, same day, Thursday, September 17th, 1970. Monica claims that on that last day of Jimmy's life, they went shopping, they walked around the city, they were alone. It was just the two of them. They went to a party later in the evening. They returned to her apartment, her flat in Kensington, London at about 1 a.m. This would be September 18th, about 1 a.m. She claims she made Jimmy a couple tuna fish sandwiches. They shared a bottle of white wine, and then they undressed and peacefully went to bed. This is a very important detail. Remember that Monica Danneman's statement, her official statement to the police, says that they undressed and they went peacefully to bed. Once again, Kathy, the other girlfriend, says this is not true. During the day, September 17th, Jimmy was out sightseeing in his car, driving around the city. He decided to drive back to the Cumberland Hotel where he would check his messages. On the way, he spots a couple female fans who flag him down. He invites them back to the hotel with him. They do come back with him. They cook him food, they pour him wine, they pamper him, they roll joints for him, they treat him like a king. Monica, who was also there, was growing more and more angry by the minute. She was becoming very jealous of these new girls. For Monica, this was her first rock star boyfriend. It was her introduction into the rock world. She was not used to this free love kind of thing, but at the same time, she was so obsessed with Jimmy that she was playing along with it. Monica was a very attractive woman. She was used to men chasing her. She was used to being in control of whatever relationships she got in, but with Jimmy, it was the other way around. She was having to chase him, and a lot of other girls were chasing Jimmy too. So on top of this, it's been said by numerous people who knew Jimmy, he didn't like confrontation. He didn't have much of a backbone. Jimmy would often say things to people, especially females, just to make them happy. He didn't want to upset them. He did not possess the ability to really tell it how it was. He offhandedly once said to Monica, just trying to appease her and make her happy, that once the whole rock star thing died down, they would go off to the country together, they would buy a cabin, they would settle down and have a family. But he really just said this to make her happy in the moment. Perhaps Monica realized that Jimmy was leading her on, bringing these two girls back to the hotel, watching them pamper Jimmy right in front of her. Maybe that sort of set her off, made her realize perhaps Jimmy's lying to me. Or maybe I'm just another groupie. Monica threw a fit. She slammed a champagne glass down and she stormed out of his hotel room. Jimmy, being the gentleman he was, he runs Monica down, he apologizes, he begs her to come back. She does come back, and then she just gets mad all over again, throws another fit, leaves again. Jimi had been invited to a party later that evening, one that Monica was not invited to, and after all, she had got PO'd and left anyway, stormed out, so Jimi went to the party without her. At 1:30 a.m., so this is Friday, September 18th, the day Jimi would inevitably be found unresponsive, Monica shows up to the party. It's late in the night, everybody's drinking and having fun. Monica shows up banging on the door. Where's Jimi? Where's Jimi? Jimi needs to come home. Jimi, who's having a good time, asks other guests to send Monica away. Keep in mind, according to Monica Dannemann's official statement, her and Jimi had went to bed at 1 a.m. This other account has her showing up to a party at 1:30 a.m. trying to retrieve Jimi. Monica, uninvited, clearly unwelcome, making everyone uncomfortable, lingers around the party for an additional hour and a half until 3 a.m. when Jimmy's finally fed up and he does decide to leave and go back to her flat with her. Guests would later say that Jimi didn't want to go to her flat with her. He wanted to go back to his hotel room. However, he had left a very expensive guitar, his favorite guitar, at Monica's apartment, and knowing that she had been throwing these spits, that she's growing more and more jealous by the hour, he was afraid she might do something to it. Mike Jeffries is stealing all of Hendrix's money, so he doesn't have money to go buy another expensive guitar. He decides to go home with Monica simply because he wants to retrieve his favorite guitar. Now let's go back to Monica's statement. Remember, her statement is that they went to the party together and they left the party at 1 a.m. At 7 a.m. the next morning, they're still awake, they're talking, they're enjoying each other's company, they decide to go to bed. She takes a sleeping tablet, they undress, they go to sleep. Monica's official statement says that she herself woke up about 3 hours later, around 10:20 a.m. After taking a sleeping tablet, she wakes up 3 hours later and decides that she needs a pack of cigarettes. She goes, she takes a walk, buys a pack of cigarettes, comes back to the flat. Monica says that when she returns, Jimi is sleeping. He's breathing normally, and get this, she even made it a point to say that his pulse was normal, but she could not wake him. She says that she tried to wake him, but he was unresponsive. She could not wake him up. Now, I'm sorry, but if your partner is peacefully sleeping, you see their breathing, you say their pulse is normal, why would you try to wake them after a long night of partying? Another weird part is the fact that she checked his pulse. How many times in your life have you seen your partner sleeping peacefully, breathing normal, and then you decide, maybe I should check their pulse? This is all a part of her official statement. She also states that after trying to wake Jimi up, realizing he is unresponsive for whatever reason she was trying to wake him up.
In the Russell Hotel at dawn, Eric Burden says he and his girlfriend, Alvinia Bridges, got a call from Dannemann.
Saying, help, I can't wake Jimi up. And I'm thinking, what's anybody want to wake Jimi up for? You know, he never gets up till midday anyway.
She realizes 9 of her sleeping tablets are missing, barbiturates. In Monica's statement, she says the ambulance workers did not arrive until nearly 1 hour later, around 11:30. She says that the EMT workers assured her Jimi would be fine. She tells them that they had a very late dinner, that they shared 1 bottle of white wine together, and at this point, they're saying Jimmy's going to be okay. We'll get him to the hospital. He's going to be all right. Miss Dannemmann's statement goes on to say that she traveled to the hospital in the ambulance with the EMT workers. So she travels to St. Mary Abbott's local hospital with Jimi, with the EMT workers. While she's there, she's out in the parking lot having a cigarette. A nurse comes out and tells her there's still a chance he's going to be saved. Not long after that, the nurse comes back and tells her, sorry, he's gone. There was nothing we could do. He's dead. The headlines, as they so often do, got it wrong. They said Jimi died due to a drugs overdose, some even saying that it was specifically heroin. Now, those who knew Jimi said that he was against using heroin and against any of his friends using heroin. As is common with celebrity and musician deaths, especially if there's supposed drugs involved, there's no real investigation. They just sort of talk to somebody who was close to them, use them as a source, and that's the official statement, right? No further investigation. The coroner, however, did leave the determination open, stating that he could not 100% determine the cause of death. Monica was the only person the police spoke to. They did not speak to the EMT ambulance workers. They did not speak to Dr. Bannister, who received Jimmy at the hospital. None of the nursing staff. They just took Monica's statement. Case closed. We go over to Jimmy's other girlfriend, Kathy Etchingham. 22 years after the fact, she traces the ambulance workers down, Reginald Jones and John Sewer. She asked them for their account of what happened when they showed up to Monica's flat. And what they told her was shocking, to say the least. They insisted that they arrived at the flat around 11:40 a.m., that Jimi Hendrix was already dead, he was DOA, and get this, Monica Danneman wasn't even there. Jimmy was alone. The ambulance workers tell Kathy Etchingham that because of Jimmy's color, they estimated he had already been dead for 4 or 5 hours. And that would be around the time Monica claims she took her sleeping pill, around 7 a.m., when supposedly her and Jimmy undressed and went to bed. Here's the real kicker. The ambulance workers said Jimmy was fully dressed. Again, because Jimmy had a lot of girlfriends, he had a lot of people around him at all times, everyone close to him said Jimmy didn't sleep with clothes on. And Monica Danneman had even said in her official statement, "We got undressed and peacefully went to bed." Furthermore, the EMT workers said no one traveled with them to the hospital. In fact, they never even met Monica Danneman. They'd never heard of her before. Dr. Bannister stated that when Hendrix arrived to the hospital, he estimated he'd been dead for at least 7 hours. He noted, and this is why he left it open, he noted that Jimmy's lungs were full of vomit and, get this, red wine, not white wine. Plus, there was no alcohol in his blood. If Jimmy had been drinking all night that night, as it is alleged, and then he fell asleep, vomited, choked on his own vomit, there would be a blood alcohol content in his blood. There was no alcohol in his blood. This baffled the doctor. The doctor even stated that he had never before had a patient who had choked to death on his own red wine. This is why Dr. Bannister left the coroner's report open. They could not explain how all of this alcohol got into his lungs without ever reaching his blood. Dr. Bannister assumed that the police would then take over and do a proper investigation. He was leaving this open. He was telling them something's not right here. But they just took Monica Danneman's statement, case closed. A bit of speculation on my part, and I would love to hear your speculation as well in the comments, which I will be reading. How would a man get vomit and red wine in his lungs without actually getting drunk? This to me seems consistent with an old torture tactic called waterboarding. It's as if someone held Jimmy down, either while he was conscious or unconscious, and just kept pouring it down his throat. It's interesting to note that Jimmy had taken part in a film where the last line in that film, he said, "choking on the grape." Inevitably, he would end up choking on the grape and dying. Some point to Mike Jeffries, some point to the CIA. Jimmy had made statements that the Black Panthers should go to Washington and shoot the place up. He had donated money to the Black Panthers. This is a very volatile time. The racists of the country are trying to keep things the old way, the segregated way. There's this new youth culture that's following these rock stars like Jimi Hendrix and Mick Jagger, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison. The Nixon administration, the Hoover administration, they feared leaders. They feared these rock stars, these celebrities. They knew that they could sway the opinion of entire populations. And who was revolting? Who was protesting? Who was causing civil unrest at this period of time? It was the youth culture who followed these musicians. Now, there's a lot more that could be said about this, and I could go into some pretty deep detail. FBI files were uncovered that had Jimi Hendrix on a list of celebrities, including other musicians and actresses and actors, who the government felt could cause civil unrest. And during the event of domestic terror or domestic unrest, if something major happened, they would actually go and kidnap this list of people that Jimi Hendrix was on, among many other famous people of the time, and they would hold them in kind of a concentration camp until the government regained control of society. That's how worried the government was at this time about a complete civil war, a complete rebellion. Some say Hendrix was assassinated for his affiliation with the Black Panthers. Some say that his manager, Mike Jeffries, thought, well, he's worth to me more dead than alive, because once he gets rid of me, I'm no longer getting those royalties. I'm no longer a part of that process. But if I get rid of him, then my name stays as his manager for the rest of my life. Any music he sells, I'm going to get those royalties. Personally, I don't know which happened, but I do not believe that Jimi Hendrix's death was accidental. A man cannot fill his lungs with red wine without getting drunk first. If it goes through your stomach and the stomach absorbs it into the bloodstream, then you pass out, throw up, choke on your own vomit. I get that. But that red wine, that vomit being present in his lungs without being in his blood, tells me that it was forced down his throat. He was indeed murdered. I would love to hear your comments on this. Feel free, any details that you've uncovered in your own research, feel free to put it in the comments. I would love to interact with you guys on this and just see what you think about everything we've just discussed in the video. Do not forget to like it. Don't forget to share it. Don't forget about our Kurt Cobain petition, which is also linked down below. And don't forget to subscribe so you can see the next video coming up. We're going to be talking more about the Kurt Cobain case, and we're going to be talking about Charles Manson and MK Ultra. By the way, MK Ultra is a real thing. You're never going to hear me talk about something on this channel that isn't real, okay? Even the government has admitted MK Ultra was a real program. With Freedom of Information Act, files have come to light. Everybody knows that, yes, the CIA was using LSD to experiment on people, even on unsuspecting civilians, just regular everyday people. They were dosing them and then just kind of watching from a distance to see what would happen. We'll be talking more about MK Ultra in the future, Charles Manson, and our man Kurt Cobain. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.